Late Night with the Devil. Late Night with the Devil is directed by Cameron and Colin Cairns and is about a 1977 live television broadcast that goes horribly wrong. That's about all I want to tell you about this movie. Look, after seeing Night Swim earlier this year and Imaginary recently, my hopes weren't very high for this film. When I got my tickets, I saw the 1 hour, 30-minute runtime and I thought, oh boy, here we go again. Another studio-produced film that's just here to make money and is going to be another weak horror film. But oh man, was I wrong. Okay, so I'm going to preface this by I knew nothing going into this film, and I highly recommend that's how you go see this. If you can help it, avoid trailers, avoid spoilers, don't look up anything about this movie, because I think part of the great experience I had was because I knew nothing going in. I will of course be avoiding spoilers in this video, however, I am going to talk about the style of this film, and in my opinion that's almost a spoiler, just because I didn't know about it going in. So if you want to go in completely blind, I highly recommend you go see this movie, go check it out, come back, watch this video later. It's worth your time, I promise. So what I loved about Late Night with the Devil was it was probably the most creative found footage movie I've ever seen. And I'm using found footage loosely because it's also kind of a documentary that's not a documentary, like a mockumentary, but it's not funny. It's a horror movie mockumentary that is presented almost like it could be in the found footage genre, but it also creates its own niche, and I think that is just so cool. I'm somebody that's not normally a fan of found footage films. However, if this is how you want to do it, this is beautiful. This film is presented like a real-life documentary about an event that happened on a late-night show in 1977. And the way it uses that premise and sticks to it from beginning to end is beautiful. And in my opinion is really going to separate it and make this movie one that we are going to continue to talk about for years to come. Normally I start with positives and go into negatives, however, there's so much positive to talk about in this film that I actually just want to knock the negatives out of the way, and then we'll talk about why this film is as excellent as it is. I only have a couple of negatives, but I feel like they're not even really negatives. It's just that in the context of this review, I have to talk about them, but they were clearly choices that were made by the film, and I 100% respect that. First off, there is a lot of exposition here in the opening of the film. Like, it is a lot of footage on screen while a narrator speaks to you about what happened over the years with this late night show. Now, because I didn't know the style of this film, that we were presenting it like a documentary, that confused me and honestly made me question why you're telling me all of this, because in film, you want to show, don't tell. So if you're just explaining to me all this stuff that happened, I'm gonna have a hard time being attached to these characters and invested in the story because you're just talking to me and explaining things. But in the context of the documentary, it's clear that this is a style choice. And I will admit, while that segment is long and it certainly takes its time to explain the build-up of this one night that happens on the late night show, I do think it's worth it. And once it concludes and clarifies that this is the footage that was shown that evening and what we recovered from backstage footage, it made sense, and I did not care. Yes, it's very explicit exposition, but I think in the context of this film, it is 100% okay. It's just in the moment when I was watching it, I was questioning why I was getting all of this, and it felt a little slow just in that moment. One other thing is that once we got toward the end of the film, again, no spoilers here at all, it felt like they started to teeter the line between believing that this is a real documentary and that this is a film. The suspension of disbelief that I was watching an actual documentary started to teeter into the more creative, this is a movie aspect toward the end, but I feel like it still recovered well enough, and probably upon watching it back again, I don't think that'll be a negative for me at all. And yes, I will absolutely be watching this movie again. I will be buying this movie as soon as I can. Also, this isn't a negative, but I thought it was really funny. There is an insane amount of studio logos at the start of this film. And I feel like it's probably because they needed money. This is really a unique idea, and you can't really go to a big studio head because, let's face it, they don't take risks anymore with these big studios. So it's a lot, and I mean a lot, of smaller studios coming together to make this film. And it was just really funny because I was in a really packed theater and you started to hear moans of another logo and another logo and another logo. Like, it's an absurd amount to the point you're starting to play a game of, are we going to start the movie or are we getting another logo? It was so many logos that we got to the point where the film had actually begun and someone in the theater said, finally, and we all burst out laughing. But again, that's not really something you can avoid, especially when you're making this type of film. Alright, let's talk about why this is so good. Not only is this film incredibly creative and innovative, but it does a wonderful job of giving you tension right at the start and not releasing it throughout the entire runtime. This movie is scary, but not in a jump scare kind of way, like a junk food movie like I talked about in Imaginary. No, this is something special that gets in your head and makes you anxious while you're watching, and you might not even know why you're anxious. It's very artistically done. There are 0 jump scares in this film, not one. Not even a little bit of one. But it's still terrifying. The tension just doesn't release. There's so much suspense in this film that you couldn't look away. Within the context of the style of how they're telling the story, these actors bring so much to the characters that you feel very attached to them even though it's a shorter runtime. And what's really cool is there's little details that set up what's going to happen from start to finish. Little details and context clues like things in the set, things in the background, things that characters say in passing that you don't pay a lot of mind to, but means something once you get toward the end of the film. Everybody feels unique, every character has an arc, and every piece of that arc feels important, and every character has value. Even people that you only see for a few minutes, there's value to those characters, and that's difficult to do. And I feel like one of the benefits actually of having it be set as a 1977 television production and to tell it through that lens of a documentary was budget. I'm sure the budget for this film was not very high, but it didn't need to be. Almost the entirety of this film takes place in one location on the TV set, so whenever you needed a special effect or something like that, you could put the budget toward something practical, which really adds to the weight of what you're seeing and to the level of fear that comes along with it. There are still moments of CGI here, but what's also really creative about that is to disguise your budget through the 1977 cameras, because obviously cameras back then were not as good quality as they are now. And while CGI is used sparingly, I feel like the moments that it's there, you have no problem suspending disbelief that this is happening because you're seeing it through the eyes of a lens that was from 1977. I loved everything about this. The TV host, Jack Delroy, and his performance is fantastic. And the character is just so interesting. Again, we haven't lived with him for very long, but we're told his story very early on in the documentary style of exposition. And when we see him on camera and see how he's interacting with people, there's just so much there. There's so much weight to that character and everything that's happening and what this broadcast means to him and his show. As the character grows and evolves and we learn more about him, it's truly fascinating. This film also does not take a second to breathe. Like, it's an hour and a half and it uses every second of that to keep you on the edge of your seat. They did this thing where basically you would be watching footage from the TV broadcast, but also you'd get behind the scenes looks from cameras that were there backstage. So whenever you're watching something that's from the broadcast, it's in full color, the 1977 camera style. When you went backstage, it was in black and white, which was a great creative choice for telling this story, to separate those styles and tell you this was on screen, this was backstage, but also to allow you a different look at these characters. I feel like using a black and white color grading specifically is so raw, and it feels like when you're seeing them on TV in color, you're seeing what they're presenting, and when we go backstage and see them in black and white, you're seeing who these characters really are. This film just blew me away. I don't want to get into story details because I don't want to ruin this for anyone. Please go see this film. It is for sure going to be one of my favorites of the year. It's one of the best horror movies I've seen in a long time. I love so much that there's no jump scares, but it's still tension, suspense, and terrifying. This is going to go down as one of those special horror movies that doesn't come along all the time, but when you see it, you know it's something special. I'm giving Late Night with the Devil a 9 out of 10. Please go see this movie. It deserves your support. It deserves your time. This was truly excellent. If you like horror, you're going to enjoy this. I also want to add on part of my theater experience. Again, I was in a very packed theater watching this, and I'm seeing this late. Like, I'm not there on release day. This has been out for weeks, and it was still packed, which was great to see. But when the film ended and the credits started rolling, no one moved. No one stood up. We were sitting in our seats in shock. And I even heard people around me just going, wow. Like, what did I just watch? Wow. That was the impact of this film. It took a minute of these credits going before people actually felt like they could get up out of their seat. It's truly shocking and horrifying and beautiful and excellent. I can't wait to watch it again. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of Late Night with the Devil, or what's your favorite unique horror movie? Something a little bit less mainstream that you truly just love. Subscribe for more reviews very soon, and until then, so long, friends.